Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, a show celebrating and questioning one of the most beloved entertainment companies in the world through honest, passionate, and clear-eyed Disney discussions. I'm Jeff DePauli, your entertainment-obsessed host with rose-colored glasses removed. If I were to hand you the job of story editor or creative writer at Walt Disney Imagineering, what do you think that job would entail? The answer might surprise you. Today's guest, Kevin Lively, had that very job at Imagineering for a lot of years, and the journeys it took him on were all over the map. Yes, it involved theme park attractions, but it also included working on books, movies, interactive games in the park, and so much more. Plus, he even got to give official names to the 3 hitchhiking ghosts in the Haunted Mansion. Listen as Kevin shares stories about his varied experiences while writing for Walt Disney Imagineering.
Prepare for some insight. You've tuned in to an exclusive Dctc interview.
Hello, Kevin. Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Now, before we get into your Imagineering career, I know that you were a cast member long before walking through those Imagineering doors on Flower Street. So can you tell me a bit about how it all started for you with Disney?
Yeah, so I grew up in Southern California going to Disneyland a lot. And I think around high school, junior college is when I really started considering, hey, how do I get down to WDI? And so when it came time for me to transfer out of junior college, where I did all my gen ed, which is a great pro tip for anybody, is get your gen ed out of the way at community college where it costs a fraction of the amount of anywhere else. I applied at Cal State Northridge and Cal State Fullerton, got accepted to both, and then ended up going to Cal State Fullerton because it's also known as Cal State Disneyland. It's literally down the road. And so my thought was, well, go to school there, get a job at the park. And that's how you become an Imagineer, right? You start at the park. And it turns out that's actually not the case for most people. There's actually very few Imagineers with park experience. So the fact that it happened like that for me is kind of a fluke. So yeah, that's where I got hired into attractions. I knew Jungle Cruise and Tiki Room, Indiana Jones Adventure, which I tried to avoid like the plague.
Because it breaks down all the time, or what?
Because there's 2 different types of people in this world. There's Jungle Cruise skippers and there's Indiana Jones archaeologists, and you know, the people who work Indy and know Indy and love Indy and live by it, like they like live for it, like downtime, let's go, and like they're on it like the freaking SWAT team. And you know, it's like that's what they do. They take a lot of pride in it. Whereas I'm more of a laid back guy, like, hey, yeah, you know, put me some shorts, put me out into a jungle boat surrounded by real trees, tell some jokes. I don't have to tell anybody they're too short to go on the ride. And it was actually, I used to, whenever they stuck me inside Indy and I was working the temple, I would always have fun on the microphone where you do belt checks and stuff. And I would always have fun with people. And eventually, I guess, like OSHA came in. They're like, it's too loud if you use that microphone, so you can't use it anymore. So like it took away all the fun I used to do. I'm like, okay, well, that was my one joy of working Indy.
At least you got air conditioning in Indy, right?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, I used to have fun in the temple, like belt checks, you know, you always tell the kid, you know, make sure the wheel's not stuck and oh, don't worry, you'll figure it out later. That was always a fun one. So
basically you worked your Jungle Cruise jokes into Indiana Jones.
Yeah, that was the goal. I got to tell you my favorite Indy story. I was working greeter one day, and this mom and her daughter came up to me, and they're like, excuse me, we were going through the line, and then we ended up back out here. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with Indiana Jones, the entrance is literally next to the exit because you have to like tunnel like a mile into the show building. So it's like one way in, one way out. And so I look at them, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. There must be a rope down or something like that. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Here, just go on in, and I'll have somebody check to see if, you know, somebody knocked down a rope or something. And her daughter goes, see, Mom, I told you we shouldn't have hopped over that rope. And what happens is the line to get onto Indy is so long, people think like, oh, naturally that must come back this way. So they'll hop over the line or hop over the rope which will just put them into the exit, because literally is one tunnel for the way in and the way out. And that's my favorite Indy story.
That's hilarious.
Mom, I told you we shouldn't have hopped over the rope. And then the Opera House was my home attraction.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. So you were in the parks for quite some time. I know Jungle Cruise Skipper was, made a huge impact on you. But when did you officially begin at Walt Disney Imagineering?
I officially started in 2012, and as a consultant. I was doing consulting work and working at the park for like 3 months, which is crazy until the lawyers found out.
That is crazy. I've been in scenarios like that where I'm like doing some sort of job that's kind of an impressive job. And like, during the daytime, working at the same place in a lesser cool job. And you're just like, What is my life? So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So the lawyers caught on and they're like, hey, you have to pick. And I'm like, gee, let me think. I'll go do consulting at Imagineering. So yeah, that was about September-ish of 2012. Okay. Then I was a consultant for a few years, for 2.5 years, kept trying to hey, never without a job, never without any work to do, which is pretty cool. The whole time I was there, I never had to look for work, which is pretty awesome. And so I kept pushing on me, hey, can I, any full-time jobs coming up? Any, love to be a Disney employee again? No, we can't justify the head count. We can't justify the head count. This went on. And then 2 years came up and they're like, hey, you can only be a consultant for 2 years. It's the rules. And I'm like, oh, but we were in the middle of Adventure Trading Company at the time. So for that to get off the ground, they needed to keep me. So they kept me around for another 6 months. So for 2.5 years, I was a consultant. And they're like, well, you have all these other projects. We'll bring you on part-time. So I was working a maximum of 30 hours with no benefits for about 2.5 years until we got a new executive in our department. And she was, she kept calling on me to do things. And I'm like, God, you know what? I'm at my maximum. I can only work 30 hours. Sorry. She's like, that's ridiculous. And she made me full time, which was pretty cool. Yeah. So it's a wild ride of, Rafferty and I would call it the mouse machine.
Yeah, I mean, it is the mouse machine, but it's also like the corporate America machine. Like, I can't tell you how many. I mean, I've been in situations like that. I know many people who have been in situations like that. I know friends working for Disney Plus who start as temps and then try to get hired, but no, the headcount thing. It's such a frustrating thing. But it's interesting to hear that you had to go through that as well. And sadly, not surprising, but that's just kind of how it works, right?
Yeah. I mean, I compare it to that scene in Captain America Civil War where Black Panther has his claws in the car and the car's speeding and like whipping around, but he's hanging on by the bumper. Yeah. So, I mean, it was the tenacity, or as Walt would call it, the stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah.
That I think kept me around. And it was a fun ride.
All right. So your background's in writing. So was that kind of what you went into Imagineering doing? Is that where you started, or was there kind of some other way you climbed up?
Well, my background was actually in theater.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I had the same mentality that a lot of people who want to go to Imagineering had, and that was, I want to be an Imagineer, and not realizing there's hundreds of disciplines. And so it wasn't until I was writing a paper for a ceramics class at Cal State Fullerton, and I got connected with Dave Smith down at the archives, and I ended up writing about Blaine Gibson. Dave got me in contact with Chris Guzman, who was a writer at Imagineering, and she became my first advocate to get me over to Imagineering. And it was when I wrote that paper, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you could do this." And when it clicked in my head, I'm like, "Okay, this is my avenue now. This is the direction. This is what I want to be, a writer at Imagineering, not I want to be an Imagineer." And that really helps adjust your mindset and your goals and your drive and everything. And there was actually a point where they offered to switch me over to like the creative director role when we were doing Hyperspace Mountain. They offered, "Hey, do you want to be the creative director for this?" And I was just like, I sat with Kevin Rafferty because he's my mentor. And I'm like, he's like, "What do you like to do?" I'm like, "Well, I'm really good at writing." He's like, "Well, I think you should stick with it." I'm like, "All right." So I stuck with that. And the cool part about the way my role evolved too is because I was so deeply passionate about the history and the stories and the continuity, I would end up helping our franchise partners. So anytime somebody wanted to do something with Jungle Cruise, like a book or a movie or they wanted to do a new Haunted Mansion book, I would be the story representative, try to keep that continuity in line, because for 50 some odd years, that stuff went unchecked. And so people kind of just saw the Imagineering stories, the original IP, like Haunted Mansion, like a free for all, and kind of do what you want. And so it was nice, working with the team to really help solidify, treating our stories just as you would treat Frozen or you treat Toy Story with another studio.
Yeah, that is really cool. And anybody who listens to this show knows I'm like a stickler for continuity. So thank you for doing what you did. Your official title was it story editor, or did it kind of change constantly while you were there?
Yeah, it was about halfway through my time there. The leadership was like, they tweaked the titles to be more set up like a TV studio. And so, for years it was called show writing. And so, I mean, if you took the old job titles, I would have been like just show writer, then there would have been like senior show writer and executive. And so I was just like a couple steps up from, like intern to, I forgot what the first level was. And then story editor was just above that. But there was still like senior story editor, story executive, and other ladders or other rungs of the ladder above me.
I find it interesting that you say you had a theater background. I am a huge theater nerd myself who studied theater in college. And I'm curious, before you figured out like you really liked the writing thing and somebody kind of pointed you in that direction, if you could have used your theater background in Imagineering, like where would that dream role have been for you? Or did you feel like your theater knowledge lent itself to Walt Disney Imagineering?
Oh man, I mean, my theater background was just as far as like community and nothing really beyond that. So the people over with the theatrical team are like Broadway caliber. Like there's no way. Actually, no, there was, when I was there, they did bring in one guy. I think he's still there. And like when I first met him, we kind of hit it off because he came from a community theater background also, where, it's all scrappy and you have limited funds and stuff like that. So we had the same mentality, but yeah, probably it wouldn't have gone that direction.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think it was more the cliche, I want to be a ride guy. Right? That's what Tony Baxter always says. I'm a ride guy.
Yeah.
That's not a job title. But it's finding, I couldn't have been an architect, couldn't have been an engineer. I'm horrible at math, but I think it was just a matter of, finding that the story department as a kind of a home for me that would have worked out.
Very cool. Now, similar to voiceover, there is so much content that needs to be created in relation to writing that so many people just don't think about, from text in park maps to signage in the park to the text that goes, that the guests hear voice actors performing. Somebody is writing all of this. And due to that fact, you have written for a lot of different purposes during your time at Walt Disney Imagineering. So today, I want to talk about some of your projects with the hopes that it will shed some light on the different types of jobs that a writer or story editor can have at Walt Disney Imagineering. I'm going to be jumping all over the place as far as timeline is concerned. Sure. And I just want to start with Hyperspace Mountain, where you worked on attraction and pre-show scripts. Now, the interesting thing about this is when you think of a version of Space Mountain, writing or text, you just think screams, thrills, music, speed. You don't necessarily think writing when it comes to Hyperspace Mountain, but of course there's going to be some writing involved. So what exactly did you do with that one?
Yeah, so that idea was actually born from other former Imagineers, Josh Shipley, I think Brian Crosby and Jim Clark were the three that came up with it. And the name itself sells it. Like you hear Hyperspace Mountain, you know exactly what it is. And so, projects get handed over to different teams. And so when we were working on that, it was a matter of, we had all the new Star Wars movies coming up too. That was before Force Awakens. So we really didn't know much about where Star Wars was headed or anything like that. We knew, I think like the trailer, like that was about it. It was part of the Season of the Force, trying to figure out how we celebrate Star Wars. So that was part of the bigger effort. So in addition to Hyperspace Mountain, I also did like all the cheesy menu items for all the Star Wars food. And I did a copy for like the little movie that played in the Captain EO Theater and stuff like that. But trying to figure out a story for Hyperspace Mountain, we got lucky with that because it's a roller coaster, and roller coasters are not an ideal location to tell a story. But we looked at what we have. We had the queue, and we had video and audio in the queue. We couldn't change out that big ship in the stations. Kind of had to ignore that. But we had that big monitor up there in the very front, and we had all the projectors from Ghost Galaxy to play with. Mm-hmm. Also, we went over to Daniel Joseph, the modern day Yale Gracie Illusioneer, and he was able to help us develop Blaster Fire, which was pretty huge and it really added to that. So we kind of got the toolbox. We walked it. It's an experience walking Space Mountain. There's a lot of stairs, but walking out and figuring out different placement, watching videos done with a GoPro and figuring out where screens are, where we can tie in these iconic moments of being buzzed by a TIE fighter, or all this, all the X-Wings opening up into attack mode and things like that to help tell that story. I think the biggest challenge, though, was trying to figure out how to justify the ship we're in. Because ideally, you'd be sitting like in an X-Wing or a Y-Wing or something like that. But you're in the Space Mountain ride vehicle. There's nothing we can do. We had to ignore that there was no cockpit lid coming down. Just, okay, we're going to go with it. So how do we plug that in? What can the guest roll? And so what I came up with was that this is a reconnaissance mission. Our vehicles are kind of like the scanning vessels, and we're going to be accompanied by X-Wings. So we're going to go check out some wreckage above Batu, because that was the new planet we knew from the trailers. We went up to Lucas and chatted with them about story and everything. So from there, we're trying to figure out, okay, so we have our reconnaissance things. How do we tell that story? Well, we go back to the queue where we have that screen. So we were able to bring in Admiral Akbar to do the pre-show to kind of set that up. And it's one of those things where you have to design for different levels. 90% of the people are going to go on that and just go, I went on Star Wars Space Mountain, and they're totally happy. Cool. You're going to have the nerds like me who are eating up every detail, and they can watch that and go, okay, so this is a story beat. He goes over the plan. This is what we're going to do. We're flying through space. Gotcha. Using the tunnel for the jump to light speed was pretty cool. But yeah, even as far as the writer's role. So it was developing that, but also I was going through with iMovie and those GoPro videos and plugging in concept art and really setting up a flow of how it goes. Not every writer does that. That's just something I would take on because it helped me develop the flow of the show.
So it sounds like a lot of what you wrote for this was more for the creatives' benefit and less what people are seeing or hearing. Although there was some dialogue and stuff.
Yeah, we did write all the banter for the pilots.
And you worked in It's a Trap.
Of course. You have to. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those
standing ovation for that alone.
Yeah, it's that and the jump to the light speed. That's what you expect in a Star Wars ride. But yeah, we wrote all the pilot stuff, and then all the pilots except for a Blue Leader were played by Imagineers.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so Josh, who was one of the people who came up with the idea, he plays one of the pilots. I'm Blue too. And then the actress we brought in for Blue Leader, she does a lot of anime voiceover. I don't remember her name, but she was really good. So yeah, that's Hyperspace Mountain. It's again, what I did was different than how other creative teams approach, which is kind of cool because then you discover people's untapped talents.
Yeah, it's, I mean, especially when you're dealing with Star Wars and you have Lucasfilm to answer to and stuff, I'm sure it can get a lot of meetings and back and forths and approvals needing to happen, even for just, a roller coaster in the dark.
Oh, actually, I mean, that project was pretty simple. It was pretty early on. They took us up to Lucas and they gave us the whole grand tour, which was completely unnecessary. But boy, I am so glad I went on it. Yeah, I'm not going to say no. But they showed us all kinds of cool stuff. And then, it was just the really early stages of everything. But yeah, the Lucas team was really cool on that project. And I don't remember getting a lot of notes. I think they were just excited to start playing in Disneyland.
I love it. I mean, I think Hyperspace Mountain is my favorite, to be honest.
It's really fun. Yeah. And the nice part about that technology too, is they can just, they could plug it in, I think overnight. It's a quick change out because it's all media driven.
It's pretty awesome. Let's go to Jungle Cruise because, of course, as we mentioned, you have a soft spot in your heart for Jungle Cruise in general. But in 2021, there was the massive refresh of Jungle Cruise. And, I mean, you kind of became the face of this to a point. You were on the Disney Parks blog videos talking about it, and you expanded the attraction's backstory, including the creation of a new character, Alberta Falls. So talk to me a bit about this, because this, I mean, well, first of all, how did you get assigned to it? Was this you begging, please, this is my space? Or did everybody at Imagineering just know, give this to Kevin?
Actually, kind of both, because I for years I was the Jungle Cruise guy, so I was the one taking care of the spiels and Jingle Cruise and Skipper Canteen and taking care of all that stuff. And so it was, I can't tell you how many different pitches for Jungle Cruise I worked on over the years. It was just one of those things that kept coming up, and then it was the perfect storm that led to it being greenlit. But I was furloughed when it was greenlit.
Oh,
and so my leaders had to fight for me to come back to work on that.
Was that a pandemic furlough?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Most of the WDI was furloughed. Only a handful brought back, and the rest were laid off. Yeah. So I came back specifically because of that. That's what that brought me back. If Jungle Cruise didn't get greenlit, I might have been laid off for all I know.
Wow.
So, coming back to work on that, it was really, full circle for me, because that's where I started. That's what I was known for, doing a lot of presentations at D23, Expo, and Destination D. I think that helped me kind of build the credibility with the fans to kind of be the face.
Mm-hmm.
Because anyone who knows me knows I love that attraction. I love the skippers. I just do anything I can to take care of it.
Where did Alberta Falls come from? Was that a name that you came up with, or was this something that they said we need this?
Yeah, that goes back to Skipper Canteen.
Okay.
I was actually the third writer for
at
Skipper
Magic
Canteen.
Kingdom.
Yeah, Magic Kingdom. Yes, the Jungle Cruise restaurant. Originally, they wanted me to bring me on as a writer, but at that time I was a consultant. They had other writers on staff who needed to fill those hours first. And so the first guy they brought in started writing it, and then he left the company, and then they brought in somebody else, and he was on it for about 2 weeks and then moved to a different project or something. I'm not sure what happened. So then they were finally able to call me. And so I was put onto the Skipper Canteen project. And one of the things that I kind of walked into was they wanted to integrate the Society of Explorers and Adventurers, which is cool. And they always, they always refer to that 1899 portrait that has Hightower and Mary Oceaneer and the Murderers Row of SCA characters. And they're like, yeah, we want to have Albert Falls be a member. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. My only concern is that portrait says 1899 on it, and the Jungle Cruise story takes place like 1938. So he's gonna be super old by the time this rolls around. And so they kind of fill a story beat. What we did was invented his granddaughter. She came in as kind of like the strong female lead to run the company when her grandfather disappeared. Her mom is from India, her dad's from England, so bringing some diversity to the story, which is cool. But yeah, that's where we first introduced Alberta Falls, was at the Skipper Canteen. And we did whatever we could to kind of beef up her story as much as we could within that restaurant. But it was always kind of like the long game is when we finally get to Jungle Cruise, we can use that as an opportunity to really expand her story.
Now, let me ask you this, because I read up on all that stuff when they did the refresh, and I was reading all the backstories of the characters and stuff. And I must admit, when I went and finally did the updated version of the ride, I was a little bit bummed out at like how little was mentioned of that backstory in the actual attraction. And I know that skippers kind of have a little bit of leeway as far as their spiel and stuff, but does that frustrate you as somebody who spent all of that time writing all of that content? Are you cool with like the 2% who deep dive?
I kept telling him it was too much. I'm like, guys, we have approximately 35 seconds to deliver this story. Mm-hmm. I mean, and when I say story, I mean the punchline for the scene. Like, this is not going to this is not going to be digested by the guests. We can't put this on the skipper. Like, that's not their responsibility. And so we used it more as kind of a driving force to, inspire costumes and props. And for those deep divers who really want to like get into the weeds, it's there for them to explore. But going into it, I was like, there's no way we can ask the skippers to go through this elaborate backstory of this character and how they all know each other. Like, we just, like, that's impossible. Like, with the flow of the show, it can't happen.
Okay, so you knew it going in, and you're like, okay, this is what it's going to be. This is for the 2%. And
yeah. I mean, I've taken enough trips on the river to know what is possible.
Yeah. Very cool. I also read that you worked with Disney animal programs on animal depictions in the attraction.
Yeah.
And first of all, what is Disney animal programs? Are they based at Animal Kingdom or something?
Yeah, it's the people who care for all the animals.
Oh, cool.
And they work with outreach and things like that. Super amazing partners, because they want to get that message out. They want to, talk about, how awesome animals are. when we were working on Jungle Cruise, we realized the original spot that Jungle Cruise filled when Animal Kingdom opened up in 98, that's what a Jungle Cruise was supposed to be. And so moving forward, we can kind of take a little bit more of a magical nonsense approach to the attraction. We don't have to be as National Geographic, because that's taken care of. Animal Kingdom's knocking it out of the park. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that, conservation is a thing that Disney's super passionate about, dating back to Walt. And I have my buddy Morgan would never let me live it down. Another former Imagineer, huge conservation artist. But we wanted to make sure the animals were being represented appropriately, because there's an issue with, putting like chimps in funny hats and on unicycles smoking a cigar, like on The Simpsons. Like, that's not a cool thing to do anymore. The more we learn about animals, certain animals are in danger. We want to make sure we treat them with respect. And really, we want to make fun of the situation. We don't want the punchline to degrade the animals, because that's not an image that Disney wanted to share. It would be really contradictory to put chimps in funny hats and making them do show business stuff. And then, an hour later, guest hops on a bus, they go to Animal Kingdom where they're being taught conservation. It's a very conflicting thing. So you have to think of Disney as like one big holistic approach. So that's why we work with Disney animal programs, because those are the people who are trying to get those messages out. And one of the cool things we were able to do was bring in a little side character for those deep divers, a Cockapoo, which is a flightless parrot, and that we made that Alberta's travel companion. That's an endangered species from New Zealand, and quite possibly one of the coolest looking birds ever. So even just like putting the word Cockapoo out there for somebody who's in line to whip out their phone and Google it, if we raised awareness by like one person, cool, awesome.
That's really interesting. I find that really fascinating also, because when Jungle Cruise first opened, in Walt's days, it was very National Geographic, like, as you say. But then was it Mark Davis who was kind of assigned with making it a bit more goofy?
Yeah, well, it was actually the skippers who were making it goofy, because you stick somebody into a boat where they have to do the same spiel every 10 minutes, they're going to start having fun with it.
But didn't Mark Davis like animate scenes and design characters that kind of went in the opposite direction of what you're saying they now want, and they're bringing the reality more back into it?
Yeah. So Walt was really into listening to guest feedback. Like, you hear stories about a patch of grass in the hub that was getting worn out, and people are like, "Don't worry, Walt will put up a fence so people can't walk there." He's like, "No, tear it out and put a sidewalk, because that's where people want to walk." And so when it came to the case of, he's hanging out at the Jungle Cruise exit one day, and he heard people laughing as they were getting off. And then there's also another story where a parent told a kid, like, "Oh, no, we don't have to go on that. We went on that last time."
Yeah.
So mix that, like, "Oh, well, this could be the secret sauce. Let's tweak this and make it a little bit more humorous." And Mark Davis, being, like a fantastically funny artist, brought in those anthropomorphic animals like the elephants, the gorilla camp, all those things. And it really started to skew heavier towards the comedy.
And so you kind of had to fix that, for lack of a better term, kind of.
Not necessarily. We wanted to embrace the Mark Davis spirit as much as possible. He didn't really do anything to put the animals in harms or in a negative light, because it was all about, at the end of the day, the overall theme of our Jungle Cruise refresh. And I really think it goes back to the original intent, is that nature, the jungle, the animals get the last laugh, because, the skippers aren't supposed to be there. That's not their natural environment. So if you can put them through the chaotic situations of getting like, a rhino chasing them up a pole, there you go. That's nature getting the last laugh.
Yeah.
Or the monkeys taking over, the record player and spinning around. That's not supposed to happen. That's the animals getting the last laugh.
All right. So also, in addition to working with Disney animal programs, you had to work with diversity and inclusion partners on cultural representation, which, everybody knows that's the reason why Jungle Cruise got this redo. Now, is there like a department within WDI that is kind of like full-timer focusing on this these days? Or was this like an outside company that you all had to work with? So
that falls into the lap of Carmen Smith. And you probably heard her name with all the Splash Mountain refresh and everything. Carmen is amazing. She's fantastic. And she has the most impressive Rolodex you'll ever meet. She has like people you can only imagine on speed dial. When it comes down to like, hey, we need to talk to experts about like the Cambodian ruins. She brings in like 5 professors, historians, curators, all these people who know what they're talking about. So working with her is fantastic. And from what I understand, they've been beefing up her team as they go through. And and tweak the parks.
Alrighty. Now, since you are the Jungle Cruise expert, it didn't just land there on the attraction. You actually got to work on the Disney Jungle Cruise movie in 2021, where you were the subject matter expert. I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of those things where you, little kid, going to Disneyland, riding Jungle Cruise, thinking, even imagining, number one, that there would be a Jungle Cruise movie, but then that you would be an expert working on the film, creating Easter eggs for it and writing puns. I mean, that's got to be unbelievable. Do you have any favorites that ended up in the film?
Yeah, the last joke of the movie I got to write, which is pretty cool. They are emailing me from the set saying, "Hey, we need a joke for this, we need a joke for that." And then the last scene where they're in the car, I don't want to steal Emily Blunt's thunder, but she has a zinger, and that one was mine. But yeah, that was a really cool experience. Dwayne and his team totally, they wanted to do right by the attraction. From the first time we met, I was nervous going into it because Jungle Cruise was a big part of my life. And here you have this former wrestler turned movie star who's like, I'm going to make a Jungle Cruise movie. And I'm like,
Was it his idea? Like, was this a passion project for him?
Apparently he's been trying to find like his Jack Sparrow. Like he kind of, he has kids and stuff. So I'm pretty sure it was that. And, I think like Bob Iger was his mentor. And so I'm sure like it was kind of like a perfect storm of everything coming together, but he knew his Jungle Cruise. I'll put it that way. Like he gets it. He respected it. Yeah. When we first showed him the art vault with all the art, they pulled out all the original like Herb Ryman's and Harper Goff pieces and Mark Davis pieces. And one of the things, our pieces of artwork, he said, whoever we get as director, I want him to recreate this as a shot in the movie. That's when I was like, oh, okay, he gets it. This is in good hands. And that's when my nerves went away.
That's cool. Very cool. Beyond the film, you also got to pen the postscript to the Making of Jungle Cruise book, which really, now you're in the book. Also a children's book, by the way, based around Jungle Cruise. I mean, so children's book, making of book, the movie, attractions on both coasts. I mean, gosh, you've kind of lived your Jungle Cruise dreams. Yeah,
I mean, I think the refresh being my final Disney project, at least for the time being, was a perfect way to go out for me. I have my display case of Jungle Cruise collectibles in my living room. I have my big Jingle Cruise poster up in the hallway, and yeah, I mean it's something that'll always be part of me.
Okay, why is Jingle Cruise not coming back to Disneyland? What's going on there? Because it was figured out brilliantly. The last time it was there, I was like, they got it. I love this. Do this forever. What happened?
So Disney World stuck with our original formula, and they are able to continue without a downtime. Disneyland, however, after year one, they handed it off to a different team who blew it up to a point where it required a lengthy downtime, which they don't like at Disneyland. And so because it had to go down for 2 weeks to install, I think that's what was the final straw.
That's unfortunate because I really liked it. But all right. So, also, one of the things you got into with writing was a lot of these kind of games and stuff that going on in the park. The Adventure Trading Company, Disneyland Adventureland game. Mm-hmm. How did these come about? Was this just because annual pass holders go to the parks constantly, give them something new to do? Or
that one actually was an idea that was started by Brandon Clayla. Do you know Trader Brandon?
He
does props over Universal now, but he's like the guy who did all the deco for Trader Sam's and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, he had an idea for something called the Jungle Trading Company, and it was just a little nugget of an idea. And it was actually one of the first projects I worked on. I got teamed up. That project was back when we had a Blue Sky department. That's where I got my foot in the door as a Blue Sky department.
So wait a sec, there's no Blue Sky department anymore?
No, there hasn't been for quite a while.
Really? Okay, so wait a sec. Before we jump into the game, then we got to talk about this. Explain what the Blue Sky department was, because I feel like that's the thing you always hear when Imagineers talk about the process. First, it starts with Blue Sky.
Yeah, well, Blue Sky is still a step in the process, but when I started, there was a whole dedicated team who, I mean, they would work on other stuff, but there was kind of like a quick little task force that could quickly assemble an idea to get it up off the ground and then, present it. And then if it got picked up, usually hand it off to another team.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that doesn't exist anymore.
The way everything has shifted and, the way things get paid for and everything, there's two different types of Blue Sky. There was the targeted Blue Sky, which was, hey, the park saying, hey, we need to fill we need to update this restaurant and we need it to be, I don't know, Encanto themed or whatever. And then there's inspirational blue sky, which is like, I had this idea. What if we did this house and it went upside down? And so there was those two different types. But that went away. I don't know how many years ago. It's constantly evolving with whatever, new leadership comes in, they change things, and there's not a lot of consistency with how it's set up. And so, when I was there last, there was a whole team like dedicated to, it wasn't blue sky, but it was like new business stuff. And yeah, so, but there's blue sky is still the first step in the process, right? It's the blank sheet of paper Marty always talked about. Mm-hmm. But what were we talking about?
Sorry, the adventure trading company.
Oh yeah, adventure trading company. So yeah, that was the first project, and we got it up off the ground in time to do a version of it at D23 Expo. Okay. And it went over super well. And then based on that success, we were able to get an in-park test at Disneyland like a year later, like under a year later, which is crazy because going into the project, we were being told, well, you can't do this in this amount of time. You can't get these little charms designed, manufactured through the safety process. And we kept telling you can't. Well, the cool part is when you have a cool small team that's really devoted to getting stuff done, stuff gets done. Mm-hmm. And so because we're in this little like blue sky offshoot kind of in the shadows off the main road, we were able to get stuff done. It was me, my producer, Joey Caparasso, and Morgan, who I mentioned earlier. Like it was us 1 a.m. when the park was closing at the foot of Tarzan's treehouse, installing technology that we got a crash course on because the guy who invented it was on baby leave.
Wow, that's fascinating that I guess it's kind of the under the radar thing, like you were saying. Nobody was paying enough attention to you because you always hear stories about needing to get so many green lights or permissions from so many different levels to actually do anything, but you actually just went in the park after closing and installed it yourself.
We worked awesome. With because Joey also worked in Adventureland's attractions once upon a time. His wife was a skipper at a different time than me, and I still knew everybody from Disneyland. So that project actually involved getting attractions, food and beverage, and merchandise on board for this big collaborative experience. Wow. And the partners down at the parks were phenomenal. Like they moved mountains for us. It was refreshing to hear we can't do that, change into let's figure that out. And it worked. It was great. Getting 3 lines of business to team up on something like that was pretty insane.
That's actually a great story. I love to hear that because I think that most people, including myself, wouldn't think something like that is possible in such a huge corporation situation. Mm-hmm. So that's going back to those community theater roots right there.
Yeah.
And being like, what are we going to do? What job do I have to do that I have, not enough training in, but enough to make it work?
Yeah. So we basically lived down in the park and we were wearing cast member costumes and, doing things like, hey, let's lead an expedition for anybody who has this charm. Let's take them on a expedition on Tom Sawyer Island. So we worked with attractions to get a raft to take us to Tom Sawyer Island. But then it was like us with like a reach and stick, adding a sign to the skeleton that said "Seek W. Turner." Like things like we did things like you shouldn't be doing things. Like there's no way anybody with supervision, like we were a bunch of kids running around Disneyland.
Yeah, you were doing some union job that you were not a part of.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But it got done.
It got done and it worked. Did that also inspire the Haunted Mansion Ghost Post subscription box?
That was a separate effort it was spearheaded by Sarah Thatcher, who just opened up Galactic Star Cruiser. She is an amazingly brilliant mind coming from the world of augmented reality games. Okay. So a lot of things. Sense. You remember like they did The Optimist at D23 Expo, which tied into Tomorrowland movie. And then there was like a big viral like Tron promotion where it was like, look into the code and go to this website. And her brain operates on a different level as far as that stuff is concerned. And so we worked with her. She was over at R&D and we consulted with like magicians and we consulted with all these other people for that project. And it was such a unique opportunity. That was also just, a test to see how successful it could be. And it sold out in seconds.
And you were writing like game pieces and stuff, right?
Yeah. So working with them, like the best direction would be like, tell me what you need, and then I can put it into a story filter. Tell me what beats we need to hit. I'll run it through the Haunted Mansion filter and make this into a newspaper. I'll make this into a wedding invitation. But as far as like, coming up with like, oh yeah, let's like one of the gags I think it was a wedding invitation, but if you stuck it into the freezer, it had color changing ink. And so a different message would pop up like that. That was all Sarah and her team. But when it was like, we need, the invitation to say X, Y, and Z, run it through the Kevin filter. I can make it Haunted Mansion-y for you. But yeah, that was a super cool project. I never got one.
Are you kidding me? They didn't send you one?
Nope.
Somebody listening, send it to Kevin.
They were serious about the 999 that they were limited to. And they sold out like in seconds.
That's crazy. Sticking with Haunted Mansion for a second, you did work on Muppets Haunted Mansion as a story advisor. Once again, something kind of similar to what you were doing with the Jungle Cruise movie, I would assume. And you are clearly a Muppets fan, as you have a Jim Henson quote on your website where many might expect a Walt Disney quote. So obviously you're a huge Henson Muppets fan. And I actually interviewed Bill Beretta on this show, who was an executive producer of that. He is awesome. He performs Pepe and stuff. But one of the questions I asked him, and I really appreciated his honesty, I said, were you like a super fan of Haunted Mansion? Did you know, the mythology behind it and stuff? And he goes, nope. He's like, the Imagineers are the folks that took care of that. And he didn't specifically mention you, but I assume he's talking about you and perhaps some other folks.
Yeah. So for that project, teamed up with we call her my work sister, Julene, who works with the franchise team. And Haunted Mansion is her Jungle Cruise. Like she has a room in her house devoted to Haunted Mansion. She got engaged on the Haunted Mansion. Like that is her cup of tea. And then also Jeff Moskowitz, who was the producer for the Hatbox Ghost, also a huge Haunted Mansion fan. They were kind of like the core advising team. And then Danny, who now works with the Muppet team, she was part of the franchise team, also another Disney Parks nerd like us. So they were in really good hands as far as having the nerd support from the Haunted Mansion fan community. But as far as like the mansion and all that stuff goes, I love the mansion. I don't love it as much as Jungle Cruise, but it's up there on the Mount Rushmore of attractions. But I had spent years working with like the Tales from the Haunted Mansion books and different other projects, like the Disney XD shorts where the DuckTales characters did stop motion in the Haunted Mansion, working on that to make sure that story continuity lined up.
Wow. So you've done so many crazy things. It's insane. In fact, you were a ghostwriter for the Hatbox Ghost, which is crazy as well. I read an article, I believe it was Disney Parks blog, and there's one specific question I want to ask you about, because the question was, first of all, actually, did you write the questions and the answers, or did somebody send you the questions and you had to come up with answers?
They sent Hatbox Ghost the questions.
Okay. So the question was, we heard a rumor that you were married to the bride before she gave you the axe. And the response you wrote is, don't believe the rumors that are floating around. Constance and I have never been romantically connected. And the reason I love this is because like this is on the Disney Parks blog. This is now becoming a part of Walt Disney Archive's history and storytelling. So did you have to get permissions to, I assume somebody had to give a green light on your answers.
Yeah, so Haunted Mansion was also, all the like the old Disney Parks IP, like people really trusted me with that stuff. But when it came with anything Haunted Mansion related, I worked a lot with Tom Fitzgerald because he's, again, Haunted Mansion is his Jungle Cruise. He was a butler back in the day. And so when it like the craziest thing I got to do with that was give the Hitchhiking Ghost their official names.
Yeah. Now, where did that come up?
So for decades, it was either cast member created or fan created of Ezra, Phineas, and Gus, but that was not official. There was zero Imagineering Disney documentation. There was products because I think some of the designers just went to Google and doombuggies.com and found stuff. I was the geek who like protected our file folders with like the old handwritten like John Hench notes, like on Haunted Mansion scripts. Like I combed through that thing, not one mention of those names. And so when we were doing ghost posts, we had to figure out what to call these ghosts because we're doing a radio show. You can't go, hey, Hitchhiking Ghost number 1, what do you think about this? You have to have the names. So I worked with Tom Fitz and I worked with Bob Weiss on getting the official names. And the first thing I said was like, listen, we need to keep the first names. It's so ingrained with the Haunted Mansion fan community that if we do anything besides that, nobody will listen. They'll revolt. We'll be in the Haunted Mansion 6 feet under. They get a hold of us and after changing their names, but we can expand on their title, on their last names, and don't give them a huge backstory because it's not needed. Because at the end of the day, these are hitchhiking ghosts. But if we can give them like maybe a profession and the way they died or something like that, then we can roll into that. And so I try to take the Exitensio Mark Davis approach with those. And so with the tall, skinny Ezra, we made his last name Bean, kind of like a green bean, because that's what he reminded me of. And then we had Professor Phineas Plump, who always had, he's short and a little bit more plump like me, but he always had a carpet bag. I'm like, well, what if we made him like a snake oil salesman? And he was just a snake oil salesman who was done in by his own concoction. And then we have Gus, because sometimes you don't need a last name, because Gus is just like, he's the comedy, he's the dopey of the group, right? He's the wild man of the comedy trio. And so we just made him Gus. It's all you need to know. And he was sent to jail for a crime he didn't commit. So he's like a member of the A-Team.
That's awesome that you got to do that. That is a very cool part of the job. But I got to say, one of my favorites is the fake marketing that you do, especially in Cars Land. First time I saw, of course, everybody who's been to Cars Land during the holidays knows that they do awesome holiday decoration overlays. But one of the first times that I saw Hocus Spocus, the fake movie poster, I was like, first of all, I was convinced. I was like, this is a hint. We're getting a sequel. We are definitely getting a sequel. But I loved Hocus Spocus. I think that that's great. And Coolant Runnings. I mean, how much fun is that? That is directly from Jungle Cruise pun spiels, right? Like, that's your forte.
Yeah, it was Jay Ward from Pixar, who's like the godfather of the Cars franchise. He's like the overseer of it all. It was him and I with a big conference table with like other people from Pixar and Imagineering, like Laster across the table. But just him and I with a stack of cards, just writing down the stupidest holiday and Halloween movie titles for Cars. And it's just like what could rise to the top. And the fact that we got Coolant Runnings in there. And then it was designed by Ali Wong, who's a graphic designer at Imagineering, who became my partner in crime. And she did the construction walls for Toontown and stuff. And she was, my graphic designer for all the Mickey and Minnie's and stuff. So when that attraction opens up, there's going to be some really fantastic things. But I think with Coolant Runnings and Hocus Pocus, it only kind of speaks to like, this is the generation of Imagineers. This is what we grew up with. Yes. We're not going to put like Apple Dumpling Gang references in. We're going to do like Cool Runnings references, and we're going to do the stuff we grew up with.
I love it. I thought that was fantastic when I saw that. But I got to ask you, and this is probably going to be an annoying question, but I have to because you've worked on stuff in Cars Land, and this is a place obviously where cars are alive. I want to know, why do cars decorate with their body parts?
Sometimes you just got to ignore things.
Just accept it.
Yep.
I mean, it has to be a conversation at Imagineering, right?
We had many conversations, and like what is Mater really? Is he a serial killer? Like,
I love it. Another cool thing you did in Cars Land was this is epic, the holiday lyrics for some of the rides.
Those are fun.
Come on, how much fun! And I know that you got to even direct the voice actors quite a bit. I don't know about for that specifically, but over the years, how much fun is that? I mean, you're getting paid to be Weird Al for a little while.
Yeah, Weird Al being one of my childhood heroes. He's still one of my heroes. That's why I usually wear Hawaiian shirts. But Kevin Rafferty having written all these amazing songs, original songs for the attractions, and then being able to go in there and do the parodies for them was super awesome. He wrote the Jingle Bells one and actually recorded that one when they did the initial recordings, because he had hoped to get a holiday show in there. And so, we brought in another guy who like legit writes for like Grammy Award winners. And they're like, oh, we'll bring him in and he'll help us out. And then like 2 meetings in, he's like, you guys got this. Like, you don't need me. And so, a lot of that it was me. It was Roger Gould up at Pixar, especially for like a lot of the Christmas stuff. And then working with the amazing instrumentation of a performer out in Nashville. But yeah, then going to flying out to Omaha to direct Larry the Cable Guy from Mater, and then flying directly to New York for Luigi was pretty cool. Doing it twice too, like 2 months apart.
So crazy. You also have some work, that we haven't seen yet coming to the Zootopia themed land and Shanghai Disney. What kind of work is it there? Is it like signage or?
It's everything.
Everything.
Yeah,
wow. Oh.
Yeah. It's everything from signage to backstories to everything in the attraction, the scripts, and then working with our Chinese counterparts to translate and get the humor of the land in there. Because crazy, I don't speak Mandarin. So for some crazy reason, puns don't translate into different languages. And so, I was, we worked with this, Chongqing was one of the writers I was working with, and she's phenomenal. And she was able to get that humor and help me translate it so that the Chinese guests will appreciate the jokes. But yeah, that land I think is going to surprise a lot of people.
All righty. Well, from attraction and pre-show scripts to fake advertisements to game pieces to song lyrics to books to ghostwriting, there's a lot that goes into writing at Walt Disney Imagineering. Is there any area that we didn't talk about today?
Documentation. the least sexy part about the job.
Yeah, but a time-consuming one, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, man, that's the part of the project you always try to kick down the road as much as possible, and then hope you get an intern by the time it comes up. But yeah, everything at Imagineering at Disney is very well documented. Yeah, but yeah, I think you mentioned the graphics, working with the graphic designers for intent and writing all the copy for that. I did a lot. That was a lot.
You did do a lot. And listen, I mean, I think it's public knowledge at this point that you've decided to leave because of this whole move to Florida thing. And was there ever a part of you that was like, this is the dream gig, maybe I'll go? Or was it pretty clear for you that it just didn't work for your life?
We looked at it and then we weighed our options. And I reached out to a former skipper I knew out in Florida who's a real estate agent. And she was helping me look at places. And we looked at it and we just didn't work for our family. That was a big part of it. There's also like little tiny things that just added up over the years. But I think it was just time for me to move on.
Yeah. And so what does moving on look like for you? Like, what are you hoping is the next step?
There's stuff I can't talk about right now, which is pretty cool.
I was going to say that means there's something happening.
Yeah.
So
there's
good.
Yeah. I had several meetings this week.
Oh, good.
On some. Yeah. So things are moving. I have a book out with my wife, a children's bedtime book. It's the Von Blowhole method, a miracle shut-eye sleep method. It's about a whale going to bed at night. But my wife's an illustrator, so I was able to collaborate with her on that. You can get that on my website, skipperkevin.com. I also do art on the side. I started doing it as like a stress relief a few years ago because when you can create art on your own without notes and without budgets and everything like that, it's a very freeing experience. Yeah. And so when I was furloughed, I just picked up more and started carving and doing my stuff more and more and started selling it. And I did a lot of fundraisers and stuff for like chimp sanctuaries and Wild Tomorrow Fund, Toys for Tots. I always do auctions and raise money and buy a whole bunch of, I'm really good at finding deals. Toys for Tots is a really cool organization. I like to support, give kids the world. I think I've done something for them, Make-A-Wish. Yeah, that's my little side hustle. All that is at skipperkevin.com if you want to check out some Tiki jungle-y type stuff. But yeah, I have projects going on with things around the country, a couple different projects going on, which is pretty cool.
Excellent. I got to ask, were you surprised at how many people took notice when you announced you were leaving? Because I feel like I got the impression that you were kind of shocked because it's weird. You had become a face of Walt Disney Imagineering in the last few years, especially, I would say, between documentaries on Disney Plus, Disney Parks blog stuff. I don't know. Were you shocked?
Yeah, it's weird. I still don't get it. I'm still that geek. I'm still that Disney geek. But yeah, seeing like newspaper articles written about me and news stations reaching out for interviews, newspapers reaching out for interviews. And
I've wanted to interview you for a long time. I just knew not to approach because I'm like, I know the answer is no while he's working there.
Well, that's the funny part is like Disney, they were pretty good with letting me, I got interviewed for Jungle Cruise books and stuff written by skippers and a couple other podcasts. But I'm like, you guys had a lot more control over me. You could have let me do these interviews back when you had when I had adult supervision. But I also like, I know my boundaries. I'm not here to make anyone mad. Those people are still my friends. I'm still Imagineering's biggest fan. I love all my friends, and I hope the future is kind to them.
Yeah. Now, one last thing, only because I saw you mention on Twitter that you believe Honey, I Shrunk the Kids should be the next galactic Star Cruiser type experience. Anybody who knows, who listens to this show knows I am obsessed with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Rick Moranis. That is my Jungle Cruise. So I am curious. I'm sure you were joking a bit about a whole Star Cruiser type thing, but if you could do anything with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, what would you do?
I mean, I think that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, man, if you were to take the Indy ride system and you stick kids like in a Hot Wheel, right? Or you stick the guests in a Hot Wheel through like the backyard, that'd be pretty rad.
That'd be amazing. I will never get over the fact that we didn't at least get some grass blades from the Disney Hollywood Studios playground put into Toy Story Land. I will never get over it. I will never forgive them for not doing that. But
that was such a cool play area. I still have all my photos from when I went when I was a kid.
That is undeniably the best playground ever built for a theme park.
Yeah, man, that was awesome. The giant super soaker and the film slide.
Well, the film slide, nobody knew what it was anymore. But why couldn't the super soaker end up in Toy Story Land? I'm pretty sure the scale is pretty close. Pretty sure. I don't know. Bums me out. Anyway, Kevin, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun chatting with you, and I appreciate you taking the time. And anything else you want to plug? You mentioned your websites, but anything else before we go?
No, not really. That's about it. Yeah, just, be cool to each other. We're all here just to have fun. And I think that's just the best advice I can give everybody. The Imagineers are out there. They're busting their humps. They're with the best intentions in the world. They do whatever they can. They're fans too. And they're amazing artists. They're world-class talent. And I really hope that everything works out for them. They get the recognition and appreciation they deserve. It was cool that, people wrote articles about me leaving, but there's also other talent that has left also. And their story should deserve to be heard too.
Well, it is interesting though, because I feel like Disney does somewhat strategically choose people who become the face of Imagineering. I mean, everybody knows Joe Rohde's face. Yeah. There are certain faces that we see, right? And therefore, they're the ones that the fans know. But there are tons of people who never get that face time, either maybe even personal choice. They don't want that sort of notoriety. But it's interesting how the fans kind of latch on to certain people when there are a tremendous amount of talented people working there. So, So they threw your face in front of us too much for us not to write and talk about it. So that's how it goes.
It's pretty surreal, but it is what it is. And I'm just happy to be here. Happy to have done what I was able to do. And an experience I'll never forget.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kevin.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. Don't miss any future episodes by subscribing and following Disney with a Z, coast to coast, on your favorite podcast app. If you enjoy the show, consider supporting it at no extra cost to you. In fact, you'll save by using the discount code DCTC at Who's Its and What's Its, where you can find magically inspired apparel. At Who's Its and What's Its, they're masters at creating that deep-cut, in-the-know sort of merch, where when people see you wearing it, they know that you're kindred spirits. Simply visit Who's Its and What's Its by clicking their link in this episode's description, and don't forget to use code DCTC when checking out to save 15% off of your entire order. Now, this episode has been executive produced by Robert Scontrino. Gain rewards like Robert, including access to never-before-heard episodes and live-stream Q&As by visiting the Patreon link in this episode's description. And don't forget that I'll be matching 100% of your first month subscription to the charity Save the Music for all new patrons joining this month, March of 2022. Basically, anything you need can be found in this episode's description, from additional information and links discussed in this episode found in the show notes, to the DCTC hotline where you can leave a voicemail and be heard on a future episode, access to the show's official website, some free gifts from me to you, and so much more. So be sure to check out this episode's description. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. This podcast is part of the Depodcast Network. Learn more about this show, plus find more quality and entertaining podcasts at depodcastnetwork.com. That's DEPodcastnetwork.com.